Hello there, and welcome back to the Showing Up to Your Life podcast and YouTube channel. My name is Art Burns, and happy holidays to you. I hope you're all having a great time. I hope you had a nice rest. I hope that for many of you, maybe you're back to work today on Monday, and if that's true, then I hope the transition back to work is nice and smooth. And maybe some of you have a few extra days off. I remember back in the days of my corporate advertising jobs and career, we often would close, the agencies would be closed for the week between Christmas and New Year's. It felt like I was a kid again. So if you're lucky enough to enjoy that time, I hope you do. I hope you have a really good time with it, and I hope you're finding time with your family, and of course I hope that you're doing all of this with a level of patience, a level of presence, a level of acceptance, compassion, and curiosity, so that you can truly show up to these holidays. And I know that this is sometimes the most challenging time, especially this year. You know, there's lots of people who this year were, maybe celebrating a Christmas without a loved one. You know, we lost a lot of people in this last year, or perhaps, you weren't able to travel to your loved ones the way you normally would. And I hope that you're able to just accept that this is what's happening, and it's not your fault, it's not my fault, it's not your family's fault, but it's just what is. And the fact that it is what it is, just the fact that reality is reality, and the more that we can accept the reality, not that we don't want to change it, not that we don't want to see our families, not that we don't want to spend time with people, but when we refuse to accept what's happening, then that's where we add a level of stress on top of whatever the disappointment is that we're struggling with, right? So we, again, as I say here a lot, we go from bad to worse. We make things much worse by refusing, by the inability to accept the reality of what's happening. So I'm hoping that you're able to embrace that. And if you're not, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. We're starting off a new week here, and I made a note the other day to do this video post today. I made a note that said that how valuable it can be to have a coach to help you through, to help you to develop a way of life that I describe, to develop an approach to life that is based upon presence, acceptance, compassion, and curiosity. And the reason I say that is because so much of our lives, right, is spent unwittingly practicing something, right, and for most of us it is not necessarily compassion or acceptance or presence that we're practicing, right? As I've talked about here many times, the whole, the world that we live in, right, is pushing us away from presence, acceptance, and compassion. The world we live in is all about, thinking about what's next. Where am I going to get the new car, or the new gadget, or the new set of clothes that I want? When I get that thing, what's next after that? How do I work to get that thing that's in my future, right? And it goes way back to when we're kids, right? First grade, we're taught that, okay, when you get done with first grade, you get to second grade, and then you get to third grade after that, and eventually you get all the way up to high school, and then college, and now you have a career. We're constantly looking forward, right? So there's nothing very present about the way we're trained to be, right? In addition, acceptance, right? We're not taught to accept things, we're taught to change things, right? Now, of course, as I say, acceptance doesn't mean that you can't change what you want to change in your life, right? But what it means is that, when we, not only are we taught to change things, but we're taught not to accept things, right? We're taught that there's always a way out of whatever it is that we're not comfortable with, right? Now, again, this has a lot to do with a lot of forces that are bigger than just, single people. I'm talking about advertising and marketing and, things of this nature, right? We're taught that when we have a headache, we take an Advil. When we have a little cold symptom, we take some sort of over-the-counter cold remedy. We're taught that when we're in some kind of discomfort, we immediately should try to get back into comfort, right? Now, of course, there's nothing wrong with feeling comfort, But there is something to be said for the ability to be able to be with the pain that we're feeling, even if it's temporarily. I often tell people, like, okay, if you're feeling like you have a bad headache and you want to take an aspirin, that's fine, right? Or Tylenol, whatever it is. But before you do that, set a timer. Set a timer for 30 minutes, okay? And see if you can sit with that headache for 30 minutes. Right? And what you might find is that when the timer goes off, you realize, like, wow, I kind of forgot I had that headache. Like, isn't that interesting? And now ask yourself, do you really need that little pill that you're going to take? Because chances are, again, with impermanence, the impermanence of our physical sensations. Now, sometimes a headache is a real doozy. People get migraine headaches. Certainly, if you had a little too much eggnog, the day after Christmas, you're going to feel a little bit, you're going to have a headache that's not going to just go away on its own. Those hangover headaches can be some of the worst headaches out there. But most of the time, if we're having a headache, it's usually just your body telling you something, right? Maybe you're dehydrated, maybe you're hungry, maybe you just need a little fresh air. And a lot of times when we can just kind of allow ourselves to be with the headache and even pay attention to the headache, even like for a few minutes, like, let it in and say, hi, headache, look, I see you're here to visit me today. Let's spend some time together, right? And kind of be curious about it, right? And see if you can feel the pain kind of change a little bit. Now, this is not a masochistic kind of thing. And if you're really in pain, like certainly if you have a broken bone or something like that, or you have a terrible toothache or something like that, I'm not telling you that you should, cause yourself to suffer more than necessary. Don't torture yourself, right? But set a little timer, even if it's 5 minutes. Allow yourself to be with the pain just for a little while before you go and relieve it. This is going to teach you a little bit of something about your acceptance, right? And then, of course, the granddaddy of them all, right? Compassion. This is my favorite, right? I talk about this a lot. I love living with compassion. It has changed my life in so many ways. And I watch it change the life of client after client after client. So I really, and in the new year, you're going to hear, even starting tomorrow, you're going to hear me talk a lot more about compassion. If I haven't been talking about it already enough, I'm going to talk a lot more about it, because really practicing compassion is something that can really just do so much amazing, give us so much amazing benefit in our physical, mental, and emotional health. And so, again, with compassion, we are not necessarily taught compassion. We're not practicing compassion as a society. Right? We're not. I mean, if we were, we'd have laws that, we wouldn't have homeless people living on the street when there's, more empty houses than there are homeless people out on the street, right? Like that's not how we would live. So there's a societal sort of aversion to compassion on a certain level, right? We're taught to be competitive. We're taught to get, to take care of ourselves, right? This is why we have billionaires in the world, right? Nobody needs hundreds of billions of dollars, right? You can never spend that much money in several lifetimes, right? But yet we have those people because there's a competition, right? There's a competition to get as much as you can get, to do as much as you can do, to win, to be at the top of that hill, right? And that's not what compassion is all about. Now here's the thing, right? Compassion doesn't mean that you have to be poor. It doesn't mean that you have to be, you have to do without anything, really. I mean, you can be very successful. You can be very wealthy. You can be very, successful in business, but still have a level of compassion. I just read a story about a guy who was about 10 years ago in Seattle. He runs a payroll processing company, I believe it is, in Seattle. And company, he used to make personally like $1 million a year. And he found out that some of his employees were struggling so hard that what he did was he reduced his salary to about $100,000 a year, and he raised the minimum salary of every employee in his business to $70,000 a year. That's $35 an hour based on a 40-hour work week, 50 weeks a year, right? So that's that's what, over two times the amount that we're struggling to pay on a federal level as a minimum wage, right? And this is somebody who did that because he noticed the suffering. his people were going through. Now, I mean, I'm sure he still has. I mean, I don't know his financial situation or stuff, but he's obviously, given up a lot of his own. But he didn't give up everything, right? He's still making $100,000, which is not bad. I mean, you can certainly live comfortably on $100,000. So what he's done is he's decided to live comfortably so that others could live comfortably instead of him living lavishly so that other people would have to suffer. You see, that's what compassion is all about. And you don't hear very many stories about that in our society because our society is not based on that concept of caring for one another, of reducing each other's suffering, right? We're only concerned with our own suffering. Right? And so when we feel like we can just hoard all this money in the bank, then we'll never suffer. Of course, this is not true. There are plenty of stories about very wealthy people who are suffering more than poor people. And there's also stories about very poor people who are happier than even the wealthiest people, right? So it has nothing to do with how much or how little you have, right? It has to do with noticing the suffering of yourself and others, and to take action to stand with that suffering, right? To turn towards it, stand with it, and take action to reduce that suffering, right? But again, I mean, this is nothing new, right? Like the actions of reducing our own suffering is basically motivates every single action that every single one of us does every single day, right? So the idea then is not to just reduce our suffering, but to consider others' suffering as well. Right? And that, of course, has to do with the empathy as well as the compassion that we talk about, right? And then finally, curiosity. And this is something else that we're not taught this as kids, right? We're not taught to be curious about things like history. We're taught this is the way it happened, so study, take the test, get done with your, 5th grade so you can go on to 6th grade and all that kind of stuff. But when we take a little curiosity and we, together with the compassion, the presence, and the acceptance, then we come to realize that some of these stories that we've heard, Christopher Columbus, the story of Thanksgiving, the story of indigenous people, even right now I'm reading Graham Hancock's latest book about how far back civilized people in North and South America have really been. I mean, up until now, they basically felt that maybe about 10, 12,000 years ago, that was it. That was the earliest that anybody was here. But he's showing evidence that shows hundreds of thousands of years ago that people lived here. So again, if we're curious about things, we ask questions, we open ourselves up to the possibilities. Right? And remember, one of the key constituents of well-being is the outlook, right? The ability to have a positive outlook. And that relies quite a bit on curiosity, right? Because if you're not curious about it, if you're not curious about how good can things get, right? If you're just convinced that, okay, things are going to be bad, I'm not going to be happy here, this is going to be a bad situation, I'm not going to like it, and this, of course, brings us back to the non-judging awareness, right? Because non-judging awareness and curiosity are basically the same thing, right? So if we can just be curious about things while at the same time being present, being accepting, and being compassionate, well then, my friends, this is everything, right? Like if you can hit those 4 things, well then all 4 of those constituents of well-being will be taken care of, and you will find yourself well. You'll find yourself healthy, you'll find yourself happy, you'll find yourself, resilient with a positive outlook, with the ability to hold your attention, because a wandering mind is an unhappy mind, and with the ability to be generous and altruistic, right? Because again, that's part of compassion, but the compassion, that needs to notice the opportunities for kindness and compassion and generosity and altruism, right? But again, if we can handle all 4 of those things, those big sort of areas of our lives, well, then that's everything. Then we will be healthy and we will be happy. And so will those around us, right? So many people who I've worked with, right, have seen not just their own lives change, but they've seen the lives of their whole families change, right? They've seen the people that they talk to every single day. They have a different sort of outlook because they are, it's almost like it rubs off on people, right? And it does rub off on people in two ways, right? Number one is that you're giving off this energy of a calm and a grounded energy that is attractive and alluring for people, right? But the other thing that you're doing, especially in a family situation, right? You are going to change the way that you respond to things in your family, right? So if you practice compassion, presence, acceptance, and curiosity for just a couple of months, you're going to develop a habit, a trait of presence, acceptance, compassion, and curiosity. And once you do that, then what happens is when the child spills the bowl of milk in the dining room, right? Your response is not going to be something that's going to drive stress up in your house. Your response is going to be something that drives stress down. And that is going to change the way everybody responds to that situation. It's really, really amazing, and I've watched it happen time and time and time again, right? And so back to my original question here. Why a coach, right? Why do you need a coach to do this, right? And that's because, again, as I just illustrated to you, so many of these things, we practice the opposite. We practice in an unwitting way. It's not like we grow up and we say, okay, you got to become hard. You got to become, don't be present, don't be accepting, don't be compassionate. It's not like that, right? But unwittingly, right? Unwittingly, through our school system, through our advertising, through our sense of competitiveness and all these things, right? We wind up practicing these ways, right? The antithesis of presence, acceptance, compassion, and curiosity, right? We wind up practicing the opposite of these, right? And again, not in a way that's intentional. It's, in fact, it's an unconscious way. And essentially that's what we're talking about, right? We're talking about bringing our unconscious behaviors and ways of being to be conscious. And once we can do that, then we can see the presence, the acceptance, the compassion, and curiosity, right? So again, why do you need a coach, right? Because the reason why is because, again, we're not naturally practicing any of this, right? This is not something that comes just as part of life here in the US or in Western civilization, right? And so what we have to do is we have to unlearn a lot of really big, deep set habits that we have, right? We have to unlearn these in order to learn these new ways of being, right? And again, so many of us here in the Western world are living with psychological pathologies, right? A lot of us are, right? There's so much depression, there's so much anxiety, there's so much social anxiety, all kinds of different, levels of this, mental unwellness, right? And this is because we're all practicing this. We've all practiced and become people who are not feeding those four constituents of well-being, right? We're not feeding our resilience, right? We allow ourselves to get stressed and keep going down the stress line, get on that stress bus and go, right? We don't look at a positive outlook. We look at the negative outlook. We don't worry about our attention. We're with the phones and the TV and the computer, our attention is everywhere and we don't do anything to stop it, right? And of course, generosity is not something that is big for people. Yeah, sure, this time of year, everybody will kick in a little bit at the Salvation Army or something like that, but really just generosity and altruism is like a full-time thing, and it has nothing to do with money either. It has to do with just being kind, right? And just using your kindness to help other people, right? And so because we're not practicing any of those, in fact we're practicing the opposite of those things, that's why we have so much pathology, and that's what makes it so hard to make these changes. The changes are very simple, and the practices to do them are very simple. But implementing the changes, that's not that easy, right? That's what Jon Kabat-Zinn says. He says this stuff is simple, but it's not easy, okay? And that's the benefit of having someone who can, number one, so here's what a coach does, right? A coach does three really important things, in my opinion. The first thing a coach does is teach you some methods, right? I'll as a coach who teaches this stuff that we're talking about, I teach you how to do some of these practices to develop presence, acceptance, compassion, curiosity, right? And I give you a prescription of how to do the practices. If you do this every day, you will gain those benefits that you're looking for, right? Another thing that a coach does is a coach provides accountability, right? So when you're working with someone, right, when you know that every Wednesday you're going to get on the call with somebody who is going to ask you, one of the first questions is, how was your practice this week? Right? Now, I never do it in a finger wagging or you're in the principal's office kind of way. It's always very, very kind and compassionate, but it is accountability. And so if you know that you're accountable to somebody else besides yourself, then the statistics are just overwhelming, that you have so much more chances of sticking with something, right? And doing the work to get to that point, right? And then finally, something a coach does, and this is, again, these apply to everything from a life coach to a basketball coach to a stress reduction coach like me, right? And then the third thing a coach does is provides a feedback, right? An honest and clear feedback, unbiased feedback, okay? And that's something that we don't get from a lot of people. We don't get it from our families, right? Because our families are only going to tell us certain things. We don't get it from our children because our children aren't going to tell us how great we are. We don't get it from our friends because our friends are not likely to want to go there into those shadows with us, right? So when you're working with a coach, though, a coach is going to tell you exactly what he sees or she sees. And this is very valuable information for you. Now, here's the thing. I say this and I sense that most people are like, oh man, I'm going to be told how bad I am. It's actually the opposite. Most people are surprised at how well they're doing, but nobody's there to tell them that, and they don't see it because, again, that negativity bias is something that makes us feel that we're doing it wrong, that we're not doing well, we're making mistakes, we're doing things badly. That's what we are led to believe, right? And so until you can see your own benefit and value and awesomeness, you need somebody to tell you how awesome you are. Not fake, not phony baloney, but really tell you, like, okay, most people have not done the kind of practice that you did this week, so you did amazing, even though you feel like you didn't do 100% of what you set out to do. Right? Like that kind of thing. And when I work with people, generally speaking, between 8 and 12 weeks, we have completely transformed things. It's amazing. It's almost impossible. And I told you a story here a few weeks ago that, I have one client who's actually been, now some of my clients do stay with me for a long time, and I love that, right? Because it's a continuous process, right? It's not necessary, but it can be very beneficial for some people. Many people do not, but several people do. And I had one client who's been working with me for over a year, and she said that if I had told her the changes that were going to be made in her life inside of a year, she would have said I was crazy. She said I would have thought you were a snake oil salesman, and I would have run away from you. Right? So that's the thing, right? It's not like I'm going to sit here and promise you all kinds of stuff that's going to, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to allow you to make the discoveries. But I'm telling you that everybody has these benefits, this progress, and it is amazing. So if you'd like to learn more about how it works to work with a coach, it's super simple, very straightforward, and very accessible. And I mean financially and logistically accessible. So if you'd like to learn more, okay, I'm offering some specials and all that kind of stuff. So if you'd like to learn more, right now is a great time to find out. It's a great opportunity for you. So please, send me an email at art@artburnscoaching.com or go to artburnscoaching.com and book a call. You can actually book a coaching session. We can have a first coaching session free of charge. It's on me, and then we'll talk about moving forward from there if you'd like to. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Welcome back again. I'll be back again tomorrow with some more great messages for you. And I hope you're having a great day. And I hope getting back into work is take it easy. Don't rush yourself and be kind to yourself. All right, everybody. Thanks a lot. Have a great day. Bye-bye.